Today on the Canadian Arcade, we're going to install some side art on this red 5-slot Donkey Kong cabinet. Alright guys, so it's been a little while since we did a video on our red 5-slot Nintendo Donkey Kong cabinet. That's a mouthful. Today, what we're going to do is talk about installing some side art. Now, since we last left this cabinet, we've cleaned it all up. We've prepped the surfaces with some magic erasers, some alcohol wipes, put some new T-molding on it. Also did some paint touch-ups, a little bit more of a clean on the inside. So pretty much at this point, ready for some artwork. There are two real methods that you can do this, actually, with any decals. There's the wet method and the dry method. We're going to use the dry method for this. I just find it's maybe a little bit riskier for some people, but I always get great results out of it. If you're patient and you take your time, you're going to be able to get it perfectly every single time with no bubbles. Now, that being said, when you do the wet method, it's basically an extra step of adding a soapy water mix or an isopropyl alcohol water mix onto the surface that you're putting the artwork. You can also use isopropyl alcohol to clean the surface, which is one thing that I've already gone and done. Now, artwork. There are two types of artwork that we want to talk about that you're going to usually find. Artwork that has a pre-mask and artwork that doesn't. So this is artwork that does not have a masking layer to it. So this is side art that has a pre-mask. So that's what this extra white layer is here. And that just basically helps us position our artwork onto the surface. In this case, because the Mike's Arcade artwork that I have doesn't have a pre-mask, we're not going to worry about it. Essentially, that's just a layer that you would take off at the very end. You'd peel it away from the backing, you'd stick it onto the surface that you're working with, and slowly, in the same method that we're going to do with this, it's just one extra layer at the very end that you're going to remove. Now, before we begin, let's talk about some of the tools that you're going to need to do this successfully. So, things that I found that work really, really well. First and foremost, a good painter's tape. Now this is 3M blue painter's tape. Don't cheap out on this. If you can find the 3M blue stuff, I find it works perfect on every application I've ever done of side art. There is some more expensive versions of this tape, which you don't need. Some of the stuff used for fine detail edging and corners when you're painting. Not only is that more expensive, but it is a different type of adhesive on it. Just, you know, the standard blue painter's tape will do fine. Next, a good lint-free soft cloth. These microfiber cloths work wonders. A good pair of sharp scissors, nothing fancy here. Not a serrated edge, really nice clean sharp scissors. It's always good to have a hobby knife. I've got this X-Acto knife. Might not use it, but again, it's always good to have a knife on hand when you're doing any kind of graphics work. Also a squeegee. So you can make one of these yourself. If you don't have access to a squeegee, most of this stuff is just off the shelf. But if you don't have access to one of these squeegees, you can get them online. If you can't wait, you can actually make one yourself out of some pieces of felt that you can get at Michael's or the craft shop, some double-sided tape or some spray adhesive, and a piece of particle board or a nice thick card. I like this squeegee. This is an actual graphics application squeegee. You can get these, surprisingly, they're kind of expensive online. You know, usually a few bucks a piece, but there's only a couple of cents of materials. This one, however, has lasted me for a very, very long time. I've probably done, you know, upwards of 50 games, side art, pinball machines, all that kind of stuff with this one squeegee. And only recently have I had to resurface it. So again, indispensable. If you can get the right tools, you might as well. But if you can't, you can always make one yourself at home. Also, very important, we need some kind of measurement device because we want to make sure that the side art on one side is going to be the same distance, the same orientation on the other side. Now, for this, I'm going to use this square. I like it because I can actually prop it up here on top of the cabinet and set the measurements and the distance. It's just kind of a hands-free option. Let's get to it. Let's install some side art. All right, guys, so the next thing that we're going to want to do is find the proper placement of the artwork on the side of the cabinet. For a lot of games, you're going to be able to find this information by looking at their original flyers, or if you don't really care about being exact to the way it was, because let's be honest, in a lot of cases, there were no rules as to where they put them. Some games actually do have some instructions on where artwork should go. If you look at the manuals for the Nintendo Mario Brothers installation pack, it will actually say how many inches down and how many inches back from the side. Now, looking at the original flyer, I can see on the blue Donkey Kong, it looks like it's about 4 inches down and centered between the front and the back, which is about 2 inches off the back, just to make it easier for me. So we'll put it 4 inches down and 2 inches out from the side. So we're going to set our ruler here to about 4 inches. I'm just going to use a pencil just to kind of mark an idea whereabouts we want it. Okay, and then let's go 2 inches from the back. Now with the Nintendo cabinet, it's nice to do this because one of the things you'll notice is with the monitor bolts that come out the side, whether they're going down the side for a horizontal monitor or for the vertical monitor kit, you want to make sure that they don't end up in the middle of Jumpman's face or Pauline's face. So something to keep note of when you do install artwork. Now, that's done, that's out of the way. First thing that we're going to do is we need to place the artwork exactly where it needs to be, and then we'll check our measurements. So taking some painter's tape, and carefully lining up the artwork on your lines. Making sure that's level. Okay, awesome. So now that we've got the artwork exactly where we want it on the cabinet, it's time to tape it down about halfway. So a couple of pieces of this. Just take your time. Okay, so that's nice and on there. That artwork's not going anywhere. All right, now we can remove this top piece because we don't need it anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully peel the backing off of the artwork at the top, trying not to rip or crease anything. Okay, so now once we've got the backing off on the back, we're going to take the scissors and we're going to cut a clean line across. Don't rip it, because if you rip it and any of the little fibers from the backing get stuck to the back of this, you'll never get it off. It'll just be horrible. There'll be a blemish. It'll bother you. Very so carefully, we're going to bring the artwork up. And we're going to start little by little. Squeegeeing it across. A little bit of tension up here, making sure that everything is nice and level. And again, go slow, take your time, don't rush it. All right, so that's good, no bubbles, looks nice and clean. One thing when you're doing this, don't go over the edge where the backing still is, because if you do that, you're gonna get a nice ridge across your artwork when you take it off. At this point, we can remove our masking across the front. Be very careful when you do this as to not damage the artwork or you know, stretch anything. Now what we're going to do is go in reverse. Because you've put this first half on here, as long as you're nice and even with your tension and you're squeegeeing when you pull it down, it's going to be exactly where you put it when you lined it up in the first place. So, pulling the backing off ever so carefully. At a slight angle. Put some even pressure. And again, just take your time and be patient. All right, and that's it. Now, as I mentioned before, if you have artwork with a pre-mask on, now you would go and you would peel this off. And just kind of pull it down across the artwork so as not to damage anything. And it should peel off pretty easily. So a couple helpful tips. When you are installing artwork, like I said, it's nice to have a really, really sharp blade or a needle, a really fine needle. If you do end up getting a couple of bubbles and you just can't squeegee them out, then you can take that needle and do a really small pinprick. But at that point, you're kind of weighing a little dot in the artwork versus having a bubble. But if you've taken your time, you're going to end up with a great result like this. Now, one other thing to note, when you are working with a Nintendo cabinet or any cabinet with bolts on the side that go in after you put the artwork, it's a really good idea to kind of cut out around the bolts and around just a little bit inside of where the bolt head will be. Because when you put those bolts through the wood, through the artwork, and you start tightening them up, it's going to start binding the artwork and twisting it. You see that a lot on control panels too. So just something to keep in mind. But yeah, other than that, that is how you use the dry method to install side art on the side of a cabinet. So if you guys like what we're doing here on the Canadian Arcade, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, or you got a better way of doing this that can help other people and help us, please leave them down in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you, and share it with any of your friends. Or if you see anyone on the Facebook groups or the online arcade groups that is having trouble installing side art, whether it's smaller graphics like this or full-size pieces or on a pinball machine, go ahead and share this video with them too. And until next time, thanks for watching. Without Josh here, I have to do numerous camera tests to see if I'm in the frame because I'm really tall.